Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unlock some incredible leadership secrets, and they're hidden inside one of history's most powerful stories of survival. We're going to see how we can transform that story into a modern blueprint for action that, you can actually use.
All right, let's just start with this. This incredible promise from Frederick Douglass himself. This single line, it tells you we're about to witness something far more than just a story of survival. Because hidden inside one of the most harrowing journeys in history is a practical, powerful blueprint for leadership, a blueprint that really anyone can learn from.
So the big question is, how do we actually decode this blueprint? Well, we're going to explore it using 3 modern leadership frameworks. These were brilliantly put together by the author Amervis López Cobb, and they are directly inspired by Douglass's unbelievable path from bondage to becoming this global force for change. And here they are. You can think of these 3 frameworks as our toolkit for today's explainer. So first, you've got IMPOWER. That one's all about tackling broken systems. Then there's enough, which is really about building up your own inner strength, your resilience and self-worth. And finally, SEED. That's for when you need to take courageous public action. As we go through Douglass's story, you're going to see exactly how he mastered every single one of these, and how he turned just immense pain into world-changing power. Okay, so before he could even begin to fight for his freedom, Douglass had to figure out who or what his true enemy was. And you know what? It wasn't just a single person. It was a whole corrupt system, what he called slave-holding religion. This was this toxic, hypocritical use of faith to justify absolute cruelty. By just calling it out, by naming it, he was taking the very first step in that IMPOWER framework. He was shining a light on a harmful truth, and that is always the starting point for real, systemic change.
Now, the first real key to unlocking his freedom, it actually came from a super ironic source, his own master. And right there, with that one event, Douglass's journey of active resistance, well, it truly began.
So check this out. Douglass's mistress, a woman named Sophia Auld, she actually started teaching him how to read. Her husband, he was absolutely furious. But his angry reaction, which you can see in this really chilling quote, was just a massive, massive mistake on his part. Because in that single moment, he accidentally lit up the hidden truth for Douglass. Literacy, reading, that was the direct path to freedom. The very thing he tried to forbid became the one weapon Douglass had to have.
And this just perfectly lays out the central conflict of Douglass's early life, right? It was a battle for the mind. On one side, you have his master trying to, and I quote, annihilate the power of reason to create a thoughtless and therefore contented slave. But on the other side, Douglass realized that learning to read was the only way he could truly grasp how awful his condition was. And, more importantly, how he could one day escape. But here's the thing. This awakening, it wasn't liberating. Not at first. It was pure agony. Douglass himself wrote that literacy gave him this crystal-clear view of the horrible pit he was trapped in, but it showed him, and I quote, no ladder upon which to get out. So imagine that. All this knowledge, with no immediate way to act on it, brought on this unutterable anguish. It got so bad that he actually started to envy his fellow slaves for their blissful ignorance. And that anguish, that despair, it leads us right to the ultimate test of his spirit. To crush this now restless mind of his, Douglass was sent to be broken. And the man for the job? A guy named Edward Covey, a farm renter who was literally famous for his cruelty. And you know what? For 6 long months, Covey's system, it worked. Under this relentless, back-breaking labor and constant psychological torment, Douglass says he was transformed into a brute. He was, in his own words, broken in body, soul, and spirit. His hope was almost completely gone. And then, it all just spiraled to a breaking point. In only 4 days, he collapses, gets brutally beaten, he tries to get help from his master and is denied, and then he's sent right back to Covey. He is utterly defeated. But then, a fellow slave named Sandy Jenkins gives him a small root, telling him it's a protective charm. And strangely enough, this small symbol, this act of solidarity, it works. It restores his spirit, and it sets the stage for the one moment that would change literally everything. So when Covey attacks again, this time Douglass fought back, and the 2-hour battle that came next, It was so much more than a physical fight. It was a profound act of self-reclamation. This is the ENOF framework in action. He was owning his boundaries, reclaiming his self-worth, and demanding his human dignity. He was saying no more. I will not be treated like a brute.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Douglass tells us exactly what this moment meant. He says this single act of resistance transformed everything. It resurrected his spirit, it cemented his determination to be free. Now, think about this. He was still legally a slave, right? But in his own mind, the transformation was total. He was no longer a brute, he was a man.
So from this incredible turning point, Douglass's path just changed forever. You see the shift, right? He's no longer just surviving day to day. Now he's strategically planning his escape, and he's starting to forge his new identity as a leader.
After that fight with Covey, Douglass's mind was already free. So now his actions had to catch up, and they became strategic. We see him applying that seed framework here, planning a courageous escape with other enslaved men. And even though that first attempt failed and he got thrown in jail, he didn't give up. He just kept going. He learned a trade, he gained new skills, more autonomy, just building his resilience piece by piece. And it all leads up to a successful escape, where he finally gets to reclaim his own name and his true identity as Frederick Douglass.
So what's the big takeaway from Douglass's blueprint? Let's break it down. We see how he used these leadership principles one after the other. First, he illuminated the truth about slavery. That's IMPOW. Then his resistance against Covey. That was a powerful act of reclaiming his self-worth, which is the enough framework. And finally, he owned his story and strategically planned his freedom, a courageous act of demanding dignity, the very heart of Seed. When you put it all together, what he really shows us is how to transform our deepest pain into our greatest power, all through strategic, purposeful action.
You see, Frederick Douglass didn't just escape slavery. That wasn't the end of his story. He used the power of that story to disrupt the entire system, to literally help change the world. And so he leaves us with a final, really provocative question that we have to ask ourselves. What injustice, maybe in our own lives, in our workplaces, or in our communities, what injustice are you prepared to disrupt?